Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to do the final Wainwright Shortlist reviews for this year. So I've done, as you all probably know by now, I've been reading my way through the Wainwright Prize Shortlist for this year, and I've done reviews for them, and all of them will be linked in the description in case you're interested. But today I'm going to talk about two books. The Last Wilderness by Neil Ansell and Outskirts by John Grindrod. So first up we have The Last Wilderness. The subtitle is A Journey into Silence, which is really fitting because the author himself is deaf in one ear and is losing his hearing in the other ear, and so a lot of the book is a memoir of sort of rediscovering nature in new ways because of this loss of his hearing, and how his experience of nature is adapting in that sense. It is also talking, as the title The Last Wilderness would possibly suggest, he talks about how little of nature is untrodden by humans these days, and so in this book there is examinations of humans' effect on nature overall, how many species are dying or have already been lost in history because of our presence in the world, and how few places are left completely wild. This book is basically a memoir of Neil Ansell traveling to the rough bounds in the northwest Highlands of Scotland. So he goes to the same place for an entire year. He goes and visits this particular place over and over again and sees it in different seasons, and explores different parts of it, and through this year of exploring the same place, he shares his observations of the nature around him, some of his own personal experiences, as I said, of how his health affects the way that he sees the world around him, and how his place in it changes. So the memoir aspect of it, the nature and the travel writing of it, isn't exactly original. There's a lot of books that sort of have this calendar year of observations of nature, and sort of using the theme of nature as a starting point to discuss other things. The thing I liked most about this book, and that sort of keeps it a little bit separate, is the particular focus on being alone in nature. What can come out of that to separate your social life and social mind to completely immerse yourself in the world around you, is how I would put it. So it is a really beautifully memoir in a lot of ways, and while it isn't the only a book of its kind, I really enjoyed it for his exploration on being on solitude in nature. So I would really recommend this. The other book I want to talk about is Outskirts, Living Life on the Edge of the Green Belt by John Grindrod. And I thought that the Green Belt was basically a borderline between urban or suburban life and countryside. And that is sort of I think the original idea of when it was first sort of coined, this term. That was the part of the original idea. However, as far as I can sort of describe it, sort of the borderline of a city, so that so the city cannot continuously build beyond this particular borderline. And the green belt from the beginning was supposed to be actually green, but it doesn't have to be anymore in order to be called that, and to keep it separate from other cities, and also to preserve some specific natural landscapes for various reasons. So this book is sort of talking about the purpose of the green belt, what it is, the changing definition over time, very much focused on the politics around it. So apparently the green belt is a prominent political question in the UK. I had no idea about that before reading this book, and I don't think I would have picked this book up if it wasn't on the shortlist for the Wainwright. Much like American Wolf by Nate Blakeslee, in that it seems to be about nature, and in some ways it is, but more it is focused on the legislation and the conflict between groups. John Grindrod also talks about his own life, so this is also a memoir. He talks about his family life and his mother being in a wheelchair, and how her experiences shaped his childhood, coming out as gay. He also talks about his brother's agoraphobia, which was one of my favorite parts actually in the book, although it is a very small part. So there is memoir parts of the book throughout, and those were actually the parts that I liked the most. Overall, I thought that most of the book that actually discusses the green belt and the politics around it, I feel like it's a very specific niche type of book, in that if you're not in the UK, I don't think you will get as much out of it as if you actually are in the UK and you experience this question of the green belt more strongly and more personally. One of my favorite parts of the book was the chapter called Shadows in Spring, Grief in the Green Belt, that is much more specifically focused on the loss of animal life, what is actually happening in the world, in the natural world, and how much of that is already a lost game, and how much how imminent the problem is. So I thought that chapter was fantastic, and it was much more nature focused specifically, not just about the politics of the green belt. So I would say that generally this is more a book of a history of the city and sort of city planning than it is a nature writing book. In that sense, it is a completely different thing from what I was hoping it would be. And as I said, I don't think I would have picked this book up if it wasn't on the shortlist, and I'm not sure why it was on the shortlist, because it is a question that is based in nature and environmental questions, but it isn't the focus of the book, I wouldn't say. I didn't really enjoy this that much. I like the memoir parts, but for the most part it wasn't really something that interested me personally. So there's that. Outskirts by John Grindrod.